Hi, and welcome to Decoding AQ, helping you to learn the tools, mindsets, and actions to thrive in an ever-changing world. Hi, and welcome to the next episode of Decoding AQ. With me today, I have Stacey Richey joining us from Boston. So welcome, Stacey.
Thank you so much for having me, Ross. I'm super excited to be here.
Can't wait to share some of your experience. And as a little bit of background, Stacey's the VP of People at Corvus Insurance. She's a highly experienced leader who has helped build high growth tech companies by this converging act of data-driven and heart-led approach to people operations. So she's been working in talent for some time at some of the biggest and fastest growing tech companies on the planet, from companies like Google to logicmonitor and Toast. In fact, a short stint at Toast, Stacey led the go-to-market hiring, and that function in this software company was in a hyper-growth state, employing over 3,000 people per year. So lots of shift there. And at Corvus, it's an insurance company who leverage the power of AI and collaboration to not only make the world a safer place, but have been amassing multiple Best Places to Work awards. So what a better way to share some experience with Stacey joining us today. So I'm equally excited to learn from you. My first question really is, why talent? Why people? Because we're complex beings. Why would you want to get involved in that kind of area? What led you into that, Stacey?
Yeah, thank you, Ross. That's a good question. I've always been a very people person, focused on numbers as well. And so it's a strange combination a little bit, but throughout my entire life, I've always loved working with people, learning about people, understanding what makes people energized, what demotivates them, how they react to situations. And one of my most favorite hobbies I get to do for my life is just working with people and getting to learn about them. And so for me, it was just such a wonderful fit to be in a people operations field that I was like, wow, I'm never going to leave. I can't believe I have the best job in the world, which is to work with people, for people, about people.
And I'm interested in terms of your transition, where a lot of the early work was in the early part of the employee life cycle, talent acquisition. How do we get the best talent in through? And then, of course, there's a whole journey that people go through of development and retention and things. And your early roles were more in the sort of talent acquisition area, and now in as VP of People. What's been some of the biggest shifts for you in that role change? Has there been any? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, for sure. So when I started in talent acquisition, it was really interesting because the role really morphed from, can we find the best talent, to how do we continue to grow the talent, and are we hiring the right talent? And so when I started to grow my career and develop as a business partner, instead of just talking about what is this current position that we're hiring, the conversations really shifted to, what is the outcome that we're trying to achieve as a business, and then as a department, and then for this particular role. And so looking at it from that lens of strategy first, it really shifted from, just looking at this one deliverable of hiring to, okay, let's also look at the organizational design. Let's look at the career path. Let's look at the level and expertise. And by the way, does this person have the resources, the systems, the people, the processes to be successful? And so as I grew my career, I started asking a lot more of those strategic questions of my business partners, and I started to gain really a lot more familiarity with the broader, more holistic realm of people operations.
And I guess that maturity of thinking, how do we just have a great honeypot, filter out the bad eggs, and get good talent in, to thinking that in a more strategic basis of, okay, there's going to be a lot of shift that naturally will happen. How do we make sure we've got, a good flow of employee mobility? How do we shift them across from department to department? How do we develop that talent throughout that process. And of course, that requires maybe a different way of even attracting and deciding who might be right. Because I remember, even in my career, hiring people, you often focus on, oh yeah, you need mindset, focus on attitude, and then certain skills for that job, for that role. But the roles and jobs shifted so quickly and moved so quickly that you might have hired somebody right for that piece, but now it's moved, and you've got to help them through to the next bit, or you get someone else in if you've got it wrong. So I think it's interesting, the evolution now of how really multi-skilled people have to be and think about, than just maybe the lens of, oh, I'm really special, really deep in this one area. Have you got a view on that, of whether broad and more mobile individuals versus really deep in certain subject areas? Is it a blend? What's your thought around that?
Yeah, exactly. And I think you touched on a perfect point, Ross. As a company is going through hyper growth or even just regular growth, the skill set of your employees is really going to shift and change. And, we talk about the agility and adaptability, and I know you are the expert when it comes to that. And so what we do in, the philosophy, to your point, it cannot be through the lens of what makes this specific role successful. It has to be a little bit more broad, and it needs to answer the question of, in order to be successful at this company long term, what are the unique skills and abilities that this individual is going to need to have? And so, for example, at Corvus, one of the things that we did is we really looked at our core competencies to say, what are the certain skills and abilities that people at the company need who are going to be really successful? And that goes everything from our individual contributors to our C-level suite managers. And basically what we determined through a series of exercises is it came down to really three pillars for us. And those three pillars are safety, belonging, and growth. And so when I say safety, it's psychological safety. When I say belonging, it's making sure that we really are fostering an environment where not just diversity is accepted, people like you, but you really feel like you belong. And the differences that you're bringing to the table are not just acknowledged, but they're celebrated. And then when I say growth, I don't necessarily mean career growth, the person who's always going to be the hard driving overperformer. What I mean is the growth mindset, the willingness to adapt. And you touch a lot on that in your research, and the willingness to be flexible and agile, because you're exactly what you said, the work that you do today is going to be completely different than the work that somebody is going to be asked to do in a year and a half, or even 2 years. And so when we identify what those main drivers of success are, that's going to be the real foundation that you want to build each of your job competencies around.
And is there a correlation between those three elements in terms of, as you describe, pillars? When we go through change, it is tough, right? It requires energy.
Yeah.
It requires a lot of, discipline to go through, combinations of, I've got to let some things go and I've got to learn some other new bits. That can be exhausting if you're constantly on overwhelm, on change, all of those things. And I think that's been one of the drivers of a lot of challenge around this resignation, this realignment, this phase that we're going through. And I'm curious, have those three pillars given you an insight into maybe what the secret could be? Is there a secret around retaining high talent during these kind of rapid changing periods or periods of high growth? Are there correlations in there of your pillars that you've identified, or is it something else that might be elements we could learn from?
No, definitely there is a strong correlation between the talent that thrives in a highly dynamic, changing setting and what those pillars and what those competencies are for each individual organization. But on top of that, through this great resignation, I know that the focus has a lot been on talent acquisition and let's hire and let's retain this talent, but we have to also remember the flip side of it is, yes, you're going to see people leaving, but you touched on something really interesting, which is don't forget to reward the people who are staying. And let's make sure that we're identifying reasons that they're staying. Every single person is being called right now for several different opportunities to join several different companies, even as, you know, this world is facing economic instability with this inflation and recession. And what really keeps that thread between the employees and the company I've seen is really one thing, and that's connection. It's connection to the mission, it's connection to the peers, it's connection to the work that they're doing and why, and it's connection to the belief in the company that everything that we're doing together is so much greater than any single one of us could accomplish individually.
It's interesting that you bring up connection. A friend of mine, a chap called Joe Polish, is in one of the coaching groups that I go to, and he had a mini documentary talking about him, and it was called Connection. It was about connection, and often this sense of, you mentioned two words, you know, belonging and connection, that allows us to navigate difficulty, to maybe put up with hardship, but also to be able to, when we celebrate that things are going right, we're doing it with people we actually care about. So that connection. Is there something that you've uncovered of how do you foster connection? Is that a skill that you can measure for? Is it something that you do because you have the right environment? How do you make connections happen? What does that look like?
Yeah, and so that really depends on what you're trying to connect the individual and the employees to. So, for example, if you're trying to connect your employees to the business, so in other words, how do we make sure that an entry-level software engineer feels that the work that they're doing is really impactful in moving the business forward? Well, you have to make sure that they clearly see that as part of the strategic vision of the company, and it waterfalls down from the very top to their level within the company. But when you talk about interpersonal connection, there's no silver bullet with that. What I will say, and what I have found to be successful, is a lot of small interpersonal connections and a lot of small interpersonal meetings, as well as, you know, we are in a hybrid environment, a lot of remote first companies, but there's still something to be said about that in-person human connection. Just knowing that your person that you're talking to on the other side of your Zoom is more than just 2 inches. And hey, guess what? They're taller or shorter, and they're an actual human. You know, that sense of humanity cannot be overstated. It's just so important. And I think, you know, when you talk about like, how do you give those employees that humanized connection experience? It starts with being human yourself. You know, like we all have pets and lives and outside of work. And the nice thing about Zoom is you get kind of a little bit glimpse into people's personal life more than you did before. But, you know, to be honest, I have a small dog who sometimes barks in the background. And so people ask me at work, like, oh my gosh, is that Henry barking in the background? And the answer is, well, yes, let me show you him. And so, you know, it's making sure that your leaders and your teams are really focused on not just getting the work done, right? Like we're not just robots here, we're humans, and let's put the humanity first. And so let's, you know, make sure that we're sharing time. How are you doing? What kind of day are you having? It's not as simple as walking by your desk and realizing, wow, so-and-so is having a bad day. It's got to be a little bit more intentional, a little bit more obvious. And it's, you know, it has to be ingrained from all of your communication channels, whether it's, hey, let's start a meeting and first go around and share a personal story, a check-in. It has to be on your Slack channels, just channels for people to vent or to share what they're doing outside of the office. It has to be front and center that, yes, we're all together and we're all working hard and we all want to do our best work, but at the end of the day, we're number one humans. And so let's make sure we keep our number one.
I love that. In fact, we had a community masterclass led by a lady who does a lot of work around improv and using improv for helping, execs, leadership teams deal with different things, change, uncertainty. And the whole session, the title was Connection Before Content.
Yes.
And it was this whole approach in Zoom where we have potentially this habit, I'm going from meeting to meeting, next one, right? Task rabbits, in we come, let's get done next to, wait, let's just slow down. Let's just have a bit of connection beforehand. And what I've seen is we often do it at the edges. We do it at the edges when things are really gone bad and we're trying to fix something because we recognize, somebody's at the breaking point or something's gone wrong, and we'll look for a connection and want to understand and want to become human. Or at the other end when, hey, we're riding, everything's going wonderfully well and we want to go celebrate and connect. But it's actually all the small stuff in the middle where we need to, as you put it, be more overt, build in more habits that have the space for those things to happen. Needs intent. It needs a different kind of function around it, especially when we're hybrid, when we're remote. You mentioned about height. I remember, we had some of our own staff been working with us for a couple of years, and we'd never met them in person. And we set out to want to do these workcations. So we would go for a week, get everybody together in a space so we could hang out. And we did it for the first time. There was one lady who's been working with us from Venezuela, and we had our workation in Portugal. And it was amazing just to be in the same physical space as somebody that you've lived daily through Zoom, and oh, wow, you're really tall. And these types of things, they happen, don't they? In terms of, people who are maybe, you mentioned connection, and we talked about connection in two ways: connection to maybe the overall purpose of what I do matters, and connection to another person. What I've found, and I'm interested in your views of this, is a connection to self. And what I mean by that is when we go through change, we have to disconnect sometimes from a previous version of ourselves that, I've been this person, I've had this role, this is my identity. And I'm now shifting to another identity. I am this role or this person or this company, and you have to have a new connection and let go of one. Has that happened for you, or have you observed those things that people have gone through of trying to deal with self-connection, of both letting go and welcoming in new versions of ourselves? What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, anytime there's any change, that's why, with Corvus, we've experienced such rapid growth and rapid change. We opened up our EU this year office, our UK office. And so it's a lot of international expansion. And by the way, there's totally different norms and laws and, different considerations and cultural differences that most people are not aware of yet. And so that's why we sit down, and when we sat and we really analyzed, okay, what is going to make somebody really successful at our company? And we talk about that growth mindset. The growth mindset goes in, it's that self-talk that we have, that little bird on our shoulder when we feel a little bit uncertain or threatened, or, oh my gosh, I'm being asked to do something brand new and I've never done it this way. And it's that little voice inside of us that says, oh, I don't know how to do that, versus I don't know how to do that yet. And, being open to growing and recognizing that we're all learners. Nobody is really 100% expert in anything, and giving yourself that grace and recognizing this is an awesome opportunity. Change is really exciting because it's going to give you a new skill set, whatever that skill set is. And I promise you, you're going to make a mistake. I promise you, you're not going to hit it out of the ballpark 100% your first try, but you know what? You're going to learn from it and you're going to be better for it. And you're going to master it soon. And so it's really, that's why adopting that growth mindset and being super open to it and open to learning and realizing, hey, this is a process. Learning is not an event, it is a process. And being open to giving yourself that grace and recognizing you need to give yourself and also others that grace too. That's going to be key. And that's what we really try to instill in our employees. And it makes the failure of making a mistake is gone. And what it does is it says, oh yeah, that was awful. Let's not do that again. And let's share it with others. So that way they don't make that same mistake. And it's hard, but that's what requires that psychological safety in order to feel comfortable and to feel secure speaking up too.
It's a really interesting point you've made, and one that I think gets more and more complex as you add in different cultures.
Yeah.
And so trying to build in, hey, let's celebrate failure. Let's take learning from what might have been quite a private affair that was in certain ways where learning happened, certain locations, certain institutions, certain times of life, to now learning in line with life, learning out loud and learning in public, and that you're not going to knock it out the park. For many, you take some Eastern, you take some Japanese, you take certain cultures where that is so alien to
Yes.
be that way, to have that display of those things, because it was all about the performance and the execution, and to have the answer, not to be vulnerable enough to say, I don't know the answer yet, and vulnerable to go, I'll go and find it out. That would be done privately, not in public in certain things. So I think this whole mix of evolution of what the workplace has become and is becoming, from where I learn all my stuff and I then come to work to then leverage what I've built my knowledge in doing, and I might massage it at the margins with a little bit of career professional development, but not really to the level that maybe now's expected, of complete portfolio shifts of skills or application of those skills or the roles that we have to be doing that. How much of work is learning being the work, rather than, oh, I'm learning to then go and do the work. No, that's what work is now. And I think just that reframe can be, depending on what color glasses you have, could be, and the immune system response comes up, or it could be, let me have it, I'm up for it. And I think that's one of the challenges maybe a lot of people in your position face, is having to be a company-wide approach, but also hyper-personalized to the nuances of individuals, of cultures, and of, as you mentioned, opening up in new regions and don't know it yet. So you're going to make some challenges. So in terms of preparing well for that, what other activities have you seen, either in the current company or other ones or other peers, that are doing that really well, of preparing them for that just tsunami of, information, data, new things, new people coming at us?
Yeah, that's a really super question. What I have seen be really successful is, to you, it could be feeling like a hyper-personalized experience where it's brand new, something that is going to be a brand new muscle for you. And so recognizing that, and then recognizing, okay, I need to learn this. Well, I can promise you there's somebody out there, maybe one or two connections away, who's been there, done that, and willing to share their experiences with you. What I love so much about our HR community, human resources and people operations community, is really a lot of the issues that we face are global and they are really shared. And so when you talk about, hey, Stacey, you're opening up a Germany office in Frankfurt this year, the first thing I did is I went to my network and I said, oh my gosh, who do I know in Frankfurt, Germany, who's been there, done that, who I can learn from? And then what is the system and the support that I need in order to feel really comfortable with the decisions that I'm going to be forced to make? And so maybe it's, in my case, it was employment counsel, legal advice. It was, hey, this is how payroll is run. This is a really good benefits resource for you and for your employees. But that was one particular situation. Every situation that we're faced with, somebody out there has experience. And I think the best thing to do is learn from others who've gone before you. And a lot of times people, when you reach out for advice, number one, they're flattered, but number two, they just love to share their experiences. I've never gone to somebody for advice who was like, no, Stacey, absolutely not. I'm not going to share this with you. It's like, people don't say that. People want other people to do well and to succeed. And so I do recommend finding who in your network you can utilize. And then also ask yourself, what are the tools and resources that I need to be successful in order to make the right decision in some of these situations? And a lot of times you won't know what you don't even know, but the people who've been there before can help you.
Yeah, they can help you with even asking the right questions. You might not even know what the right questions are, let alone, hey, have you got an answer to this because you've been there. I like this idea, and I've talked about it before with a few people, of this shift when we reach out for help and we say, I want some advice. I want some, help. That many refrain from doing that because of this feeling or fear of burden. I'm burdening somebody with my issues, my problem, my challenge. And what I've experienced is very similar to you, Stacey, is that actually the joy of that person who's receiving it is that it's a gift you've given them for them to be able to share. And they enjoy doing that. It might be, right timing. There might be, like all of us, lots of things on our list. Is it priority? Is it not? So having a contextual awareness is helpful, but human beings do love to help each other in the main. And it's amazing that so many refrain from asking for help often until it's maybe a bit too late. And so asking early, I think, is a great piece that can avoid a lot of certain pieces. Is there, an area, so you reached out, you were opening up an office in Frankfurt, and you were getting some of the sort of operational elements of great, resources to deal with payroll, all those sorts of things. What have been some of the other maybe surprising things you've learned in opening up new geographical regions? Is there any interesting stories that you weren't perhaps expecting to learn?
Yes, there's a lot of interesting stories. I'm trying to think of ones that are appropriate.
I saw your reaction as I was lining that question up, and I thought, well, this is going to be good.
Yeah. It's interesting. Every single country and every single culture just has different norms. And one of the things that has just been so interesting in Germany for us has really been around like contracts. And just, our employment contracts are so scrutinized and so like held to the actual marking on the paper more so than any other country I've ever done business in. And so it's fascinating because one single word in a German employment contract can really change the whole contract. And that's just been fascinating. And so it's like, wow, I didn't even realize that word could mean that and have that level of variation to it. And so not only is it just like this translation, but really being able to partner up with somebody who knows the language and the norms has been key, because just their communication style is different, and how they approach problems can be a little bit different than others. And so just really learning that, hey, and understanding we're all working together here. We're all coming from a really, really good place, and we all have a shared goal of being really successful and being able to look back on this journey together and saying, hey, we accomplished magic. And so it's been, there's a lot of funny stories, but I don't know if I feel comfortable because I don't know how appropriate they are to share, but it's a constant learning.
Yeah, even just that example of, what are we 100% committed to and what is flexible?
Yeah.
When our principles of making decisions as an organization, these are the non-negotiables, these types of behaviors, these principles, this work towards this mission, but we're flexible in about how we might get there in terms of a contract from one country to another country, and from a handshake to the scrutiny of every, letter in it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really fascinating about this evolution of our work environment, where many organizations had to be a certain size before they would even come across geographical differences of contracts and things. Whereas now, a small organization of just a few can have a diversity of employment contract, employment law, everything in every country. And it's got super complicated and super challenging, not only to set them up, but then also the management, the logistics of that, and what growth mindset might even mean between one culture and another culture, one location and another location. So I think that challenge around scaling used to go hand in hand with consistency. And we're now trying to figure out how we can scale where what is not consistent and what can be hyper-personalized, different, changed bits. Is there any occasions where too much flexibility has been a bad thing, or too much variation has actually caused issues? And how have you dealt with that if there's things that have gone, actually that's too far in what our principles are or flexibilities are? Have you faced some of those things?
Yeah, absolutely. We have. We think globally and act locally is sort of the mantra for our global people operations team. And so what I mean by that is, when we approach a new country, a new process, a new system, we always think, okay, is this going to work globally for all of the different countries and cultures that we operate in? Is it going to land well? But then how do we make it hyper personal too? And so, for example, one of the mistakes that we've done is we are trying to standardize some of our benefit offerings. Well, for example, in the United States, we have unlimited PTO, paid time off. In the UK, that's not super common, but we decided to give our UK employees unlimited PTO because that's a cool benefit that not a lot of UK employers offer. So we opened up Germany and we were like, yeah, we're going to give unlimited PTO in Germany. Well, let me tell you what a mistake that was. It was just awful, because all of a sudden you were faced in this, and it's like unlimited PTO. Well, I want to take 6 months off. Oh, no. Hold on. That's not what we meant here. Hold on.
But that's what you said.
Exactly. And I'm like, hold on, let me take this back. And so it's one of those where we had to sit down and, with our resources in Germany and say, what is really PTO? What's going to be a really good balance of PTO? And so we landed on a number of accrued PTO because we wanted to give that flexibility, and we have a minimum recommended amount of PTO. So in other words, we recommend every single employee take a minimum of 15 personal days per year. It's not a lot, but if you're not taking at least 15 personal days per year, you're probably working too hard. And so what we said is, okay, in Germany, maybe not unlimited, but let's cap it, and then let's suggest a very bare minimum for all of our employees.
It reminds me of a story a long time ago. A tech firm locally here, I was friendly with the owner, and they introduced something called a Duvet day. So whilst at the time, this is probably going back maybe 15 years or so, And the flexibility that we're now thinking, i.e. unlimited paid time off, all of these things aren't unheard of, right? They're
Right.
around, and all flexibility around when you take time, and COVID, work from home, all of these things. We're in a world now where there's an awful lot more flexibility. There wasn't a lot of flexibility, certainly for them, where they're on call. They, had a lot of healthcare tech responsibilities, so maintaining the technologies in hospitals, all these sorts of things. So having people available, really critical to the service levels. And they introduced this idea of duvet days, where, you know what, you've just woken up and you are in a, it's not fully sick, but you'd normally go, I'm feeling really ill, and you'd give one of those to just say, look, I need a duvet day, whatever that may be, because something's happened in their life. We're all humans, right? Whether it's at one end of the scale, they were too heavy the night before, or something has happened with a family member, wherever that is, you could have these duvet days. And it was working really well. Everybody was really, how human that was, how heart-centered it was. And then it kind of shifted for them, because he said what changed was people were booking duvet days.
Oh.
And they were like, no, that's not the concept of them. That, I'm going to book my duvet day, not one of my paid holiday days. I'll book a duvet day because I'm going to go out or whatever it may be. And it's interesting. It just reminded me that story of Germany, where this intent to be human, to be supportive, to recognize that sometimes actually just giving that understanding and saying, yeah, just take a day, to, I'm going to pre-book it. I find it fascinating, human nature, of where you set an intent for all the right reasons, and then in the margins there's things that may go wrong. And another bit that I'd just love to touch on as we come to the end is around benefits, flexibility, and you mentioned hybrid. And I know, head office in Boston for your firm, in this balance between working in office and not working in office, and what is mandated, what's not mandated. And this is a challenge that's going for many organizations right now of, and I remember an article of, is it the eat your broccoli scenario, where your parents would say, no, you've got to eat your broccoli, and leaders are saying, no, you've got to come into the office? Or are we thinking, I'll make coming into the office so enjoyable, you can't wait to come into the office? And I'm just curious as to how is it working for you at Corvus around balancing this in-office time, out-of-office time, flexibility, and what have you learned so far from it?
Yeah, exactly. And then I also think too, like, one of the biggest fears as leaders of the organization is we don't want to have the worst of both worlds. Here we are paying for an office that nobody goes into because we're all hiring remotely. So what's interesting is Corvus has actually had a really powerful culture base and has always been hybrid. So even before this pandemic, we were hybrid. Only 50% of our employees have ever lived in Boston before we were global. But what I really have learned being on this journey with our leaders and with my network is, and this is not an opinion that's shared by a lot of people, but it is something that I and my executive leadership team really believe in, is that we can't tell our employees where, when, and how they're going to do their best work. We just can't tell them that. And so I'm never going to know what environment is the best for any one single person that just makes them flourish and feel really happy and energized. So what we've decided to do is say, okay, let me, number one, accept that. But then number two, let's also build in infrastructure so that way when people do want to come to the office and they do want to have those in-person connections, it's there for them and it's meaningful, and that you're not just being in the office and going back to back to back on Zoom meetings all day. And so what we've encouraged our employees and our people managers to do is set the working norms for your team and leave it up to the individual on where, when, and how they're going to do their best work. But make sure that you, again, have really clear, intentional moments of in-person connection. So we have one team in particular that is very introverted. They're very dispersed all over the United States in about 6 different states, and they do not like going into any of our local offices. But what they do is every quarter they get together as a team, and they get together for 2 days and just have fun. Just have that human connection. And whether it's in an office, a coffee shop, there's also, what we call away days for some of our underwriters. And, maybe it's you go to Nashville and you go out to the country bars or something like that. It's making sure that the managers set really clear expectations. Hey, this is when I do need you to be on. This is when I don't need you to be on. This is the flexibility I can offer you. But you're managing to the results. And you're managing to the results of the business. So whether you're a working parent and you need to actually be with your child all the day and you log in the evening while your child is sleeping, or it's a combination of a schedule with breaks in it, we really empower our managers to work with their direct employees to find a solution that works, but to be really, really explicit upon when attendance, and whether it's online attendance, whether it's virtual, whether it's in person, is required, and why. And so when we do have our offices that are all throughout the world, and it's up to the managers and their employees to determine what schedule works for them. We've never mandated you have to be in the office for certain days. And it's just not up to us. We believe in treating our employees like adults and humans, and leaving it up for them to tell us where and when and how they're going to do their best work, but making sure that as leaders of the company, we have very clear and very supportive direction in place to support them with that. And so everybody's kind of schedule is a little bit different, but we really trust our employees and our managers to strike that right balance.
What I like about that, Stacey, is a few bits. Treating people as adults is something that's often forgotten when we write policies and we put together processes and playbooks. And from that standpoint of assume noble intent, and then provide autonomy for the decisions in the layers around that. But the only requisite is a complete explicitity, because it's often in the ambiguity that you get the issues. If you've got within that flexibility, you've got clarity, you've got absolute, these are what the expectations are that we've just agreed of those things. And then the ambiguity is out. We're not going to cause friction because we know what's expected. When that happens, and let's say, I've agreed with you, this is what I need. I have my routine in the morning where I, walk with my dogs, I do my yoga, and I get going here, and I don't mind working later. We agree that something shifts. How easy is it to say, hey, Stacey, something's shifted for me. I now need to come in early because this is now happening because I've got to take the grandkids to evening class or whatever it might be. Can that happen? Is that happening? Or does that just create a whole set of, issues around ultimate flexibility? Oh, I'm working on here. And, I thought Stacey was in on my, no, she's changed because this has happened. How does it deal in that practicality of those things?
Yeah, that's a super good question. So in the practicality, we have established, again, I think you hit the point right on the head, where the ambiguity is where friction can occur or misunderstanding. And so we've adopted calendar transparency. Everybody puts on their calendars which location they're working from and their hours that they're working. And so when you are supposed to, let's say, be working, but you have now a different schedule, you're going to work with your manager to update what your schedule looks like on your calendar. So no matter who you are at the company, you can see what everybody's working hours and location are. And the managers, the nice thing is when you manage to the results, which means, let's just take sales, for example, you have to hit 1 million in quota per quarter. When you manage to the results, the how is up to the employee. How and when they do their work is really up to the employee, because only they know where, when, and how
what you
they're
hired
going
them
to.
for, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's 100% true. And so as long as you're managing to the results, where and how they do the work should not be the big distinguishing factor, unless of course it's like a company mandated important type of event or something like that. There's always those types of situations.
And there's always, for many organizations, the complexity where not everyone's knowledge workers. There are areas in which parts of work require a particular location or physical presence of all of those types of things. So as we come to the final witching hour, Stacey, I've got a question that I ask every one of our guests at the end, and it's a adjacent theme to adaptability around curiosity. And it's this key component, and a lot of the thread of what you've talked about of growth mindset, of being okay with not hitting it out of the park, getting a few failures, doing things for the first time, reaching out to new people to find out, how did they do it? And my question is, when was the last time you did something for the first time, and what was it?
Let's see. So the last time I did something for the first time, let's see. Well, I just led a learning and development training at the company on the threat versus reward of our social reward for the company. And that's the very first time I led this training session. And you would think as the head of people that I am used to running a lot of trainings, but a lot of the trainings that I'm used to running are more like around processes and systems. And this was very much a touchy-feely, like, hey, when you think of social reward, this is what it means, and this is how your brain reacts, and this is ways to minimize social threat and increase social reward. And I got asked a lot of questions that I was like, oh, I never really thought about that before. And it really put me on the spot because it required me to go back and learn a little bit more of the fundamentals. But that was literally not this past week, but the week before. So about a week and a half ago. And I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, I give myself a solid 6. I didn't completely fail the presentation. And I think I delivered the nuts and bolts of the presentation okay. But there were definitely places where I need to like go back and explain things more in depth or differently too.
I love that in a number of ways. One, the best way to learn something is to try and teach it,
Yes.
to try and help other people understand it. And I certainly subscribe to that, in that a lot of my education comes from trying to teach things to other people. And then you figure out, okay, what is landing, what's not landing, what are the questions they need to help refine the curriculum or refine what it is that you try and go and research, bring back and curate for people. So I like that idea. And also just the fostering and role modeling that you've shared today in our conversations, to me, gives me such a great insight into the culture of the organization at Corvus, in terms of it's not just these theories or principles or concepts. You're living it. You're living these things to take on new things, to go for it, and be vulnerable enough to be able to say, I got a 6, but I'm going to work on that. The
Yes.
power of that is massive, Stacey. I think especially the bigger our wake, the higher we are in the perceived leadership, the more we can role model in ways that show these behaviors of humility, of heart-centered, that we've got this connection, we've got belonging, and we've got a growth mindset. Wonderful. If people want to reach out to you, Stacey, to hang out, to ask you, hey, how did you get on with this? I want to learn from you. What's their best way of reaching out, Stacey?
Yeah, just search me on LinkedIn. You'll find me, Stacey Richey. It's spelled just like it sounds, except 2 E's. So Stacey and Richey as Richey as well. But yeah, Stacey Richey Corvus, and you'll find me. And I am more than happy to accept any connection requests, offer any advice, and share any more embarrassing stories that I'm happy to provide.
That's truly wonderful. I'm very grateful for your time and also your offer to other fellow human beings to, on our journey that we're on in our chapters, help each other along the way. So deep gratitude and thank you ever so much.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Ross, for having me. It's been a delight and I super appreciate being here.
Do you have the level of adaptability to survive and thrive the rapid changes ahead? Has your resilience got more comeback than a yo-yo? Do you have the ability to unlearn in order to reskill, upskill and break through? Find out today and uncover your adaptability profile and score, your AQ. Visit AQai.io to gain your personalized report across 15 scientifically validated dimensions of adaptability. For a limited time, enter code PODCAST65 for a complimentary AQME assessment. AQai, transforming the way people, teams, and organizations navigate change. Thank you for listening to this episode of Decoding AQ. Please make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast directory, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Please do leave a review and be sure to tune in next time for more insights from our amazing guests.